Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Seema Alexander, and I'm coming to you live on day 2 from the WeWork. It's our co-working sponsor and partner in downtown Washington, D.C. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and chief strategy officer of Disruptive.CEO. I support visionary founders and companies to scale and grow. I've had the honor and privilege of being the curator for the growth track for this year's DC Startup Week. And if you're not familiar with DC Startup Week, it's been around for 5 years. It's a week-long free event for growth stage and early stage entrepreneurs in the DMV region. And we could not have done this without our sponsors, especially keeping it complimentary and bringing so many experts and speakers. And today I want to make sure that we do speak to acknowledging our title sponsors. We have Next, Insperity, Wiz, and Technology River. So now I'm going to talk to you about this incredible session. I'm really, really excited about this one. Mohsin Syed, he's the EVP and Chief Startup Officer of KiwiTech. He's going to be moderating this panel, and as a quick background to him, you know, KiwiTech, he has built a unique startup program. It's over 8 years old. They've reviewed over 125,000 startups, so he knows what he's talking about, all focused in tech and product. So like he has a very, very great background in optimizing product development and sprints. And we have an incredible panel here that I'm going to introduce in a second, but you're really in for a great surprise. So in terms of our panel, we have Jesse Alton. He's a senior product director at Fearless.tech. We have Neal Conlon from nealconlon.com, but also from 2 former startups that he's recently exited in and has multiple product roles that he's going to share. Zingerline, he's a chief product officer of Sandboxx. And Rachel Koretsky, she is the co-founder and co-organizer of DC Startup Week, and also is the founder of upace. She will be joining us in just 1 second. Logistically, if you do have questions, you'll see that there is a Q&A section below, but there is a chat. If you do have questions, please put them in all capital down in the chat section. So when Mohsin is ready to ask you or look for questions, he'll know exactly where to go. So with that, I'm excited to introduce Mohsin to the DC Startup stage. Mohsin?
Seema, thank you so much for the introduction and inviting me to be the moderator for this fantastic panel. Huge shout out to you and your incredible team at DC Startup Week. This is one of those marquee startup events that I've been looking forward to every year over the last few years on the East Coast. And when you're from DC, that's the only coast that matters. So thank you so much for all that you guys do every year, kind of bringing the entire DC startup community, the DMV startup community. So it's a pleasure to be here. And before I introduce the panelists, I think the topic that we have today is something that it's very close to me. It's very close to obviously all those who are attending, because we are in a situation today where most of the entrepreneurs, almost all entrepreneurs, are presently in a frenzy mode to pivot, to enhance their products due to COVID-19. Some of them are leveraging new opportunities that this situation has yielded, while others are still trying to navigate the new challenges. So in this context, optimizing product development and sprint cycles, to creating market demand, to maximizing product market fit with, as your investors would always want to do it, without breaking the bank is key. So as Seema already introduced the panelists, love each one of them to give a quick 30-second introduction about your background, so the audience know why you are here. So please, we'll start with Rachel, founder of upace, and honestly, one of the most recognizable faces of DC Startup Week. So Rachel, we'll start with you, and we'll go around the rest of the panelists.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Kretzky. I'm one of the organizers of DC Startup Week. So you've probably seen me introing and outro and the activity stream on Attendify. I put together the whole programming of the events going on throughout the week, but that's just what I do nights and weekends. Thank you, Christina. I see you in the chat. My full-time, I am the founder of a tech startup, upace. We build out technology for fitness and wellness centers. We are a SaaS model. So I'm really excited to be here. This is my first actual panel talking on DC Startup Week, because I'm always the one behind the scenes. So wish me luck. We don't have any tech issues going on in any of the other talks. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you, Mohsin, for including me today.
Thank you, Rachel, for all that you do. Neal, you want to go next?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Neal Conlon. I spent my time for the past decade flipping back and forth between the DC, SF, and New York startup scene. Marine Corps veteran, came out, worked on the product and technology infrastructure side at a bunch of corporate companies, Cushman & Wakefield, Morgan Stanley, just to name a couple, and then became a masochist like the rest of everyone else who's at this conference, and decided we all wanted to be startup people and just kind of run the gambit. And then shifted kind of into co-founder, business development side of organizations. It became kind of a storyteller of sorts, and I really love working with early stage companies. Most recently, I've leaped into kind of cybersecurity and other kind of next gen softwares. So super excited to share some of the stories today. And thanks for everybody for including me in this panel.
Thank you, Neal. Craig, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Craigzinger. Great to meet everybody, and thanks so much for having me on today. I'm a serial entrepreneur, currently the chief product officer at a company called Sandboxx, based in Arlington. Prior to that, I was head of growth at Upside Business Travel, also based in DC, and before that was actually in the Bay Area. So similar to Neal, I've actually gone back and forth a couple of times. I have started or been a co-founder of about half a dozen companies. I've just kind of been through the bumpy patches as well as some wins along the way, and really just focus on the intersection of product, strategy, and growth. And I really think that growth is a critical aspect that us founders really need. And so I try to apply that through the product lens. So really happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Craig. Jesse?
Hello, everybody. Let's see. My name is Jesse Alton. I am a frequent visitor in the DC scene and do business in the scene, but I'm actually based in Annapolis, Maryland, just outside, so not too far. My background is I'm very much an entrepreneur. I've pretty much worked on startups consistently for the past 12 years. Fell in love with product. I think when you're an entrepreneur, you tend to have a lot of hobbies and a lot of interests, and product design and product management are the things that really stuck for me. My particular field of interest is VR, AR. We call it XR now. I'm sure it'll be something else in a year, but that's really where the majority of my free time goes. And I also teach product management and data viz at MICA. And full-time during the day, I am a senior director of product working for Medicaid through a company called Fearless. So civic technologies. It's nice to kind of apply this business model style thinking to civic tech and seeing how it impacts others.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, everyone. So quick house rules before we get started. We want this panel to be super engaging, super interactive. So for the audience, throw out your questions through the chat feature. And for the panelists, if I'm kind of lost, like in hearing and learning about you guys, which is saying, if there's a question that you think is interesting, let's put it up and let's debate or talk about it. Again, this is an equal shared responsibility between the moderator, the panelists, and the audience. So let's make the most out of this event and get a ton of learning from the experts that we have here. So to start things, I'll go to Neal first. Neal, you've had 2 exits in the last 6 years. Holy moly, that's incredible. Okay, so finding the product market fit seems to be your secret sauce. So please share what went right leading those products and product development cycles to market success, because that's the ultimate goal of every entrepreneur out there. So Neal.
Yeah, so even every time someone brings it up to me, my stomach still kind of turns, because it's like telling somebody how great it was that you were on that roller coaster for so long, because that's exactly what it was like. What comes up for me there, that the secret sauce that has happened is about 5 years ago, I was teaching sales and growth at Duke University, at an entrepreneur program that was going on, and it was all CEOs and founders of traditional businesses. And at that time, a big piece of my curriculum was how do we make a better mousetrap, right? And it was constantly like, that's the world of product, is like, how do you just make the mousetrap just a little bit better? And what we've seen, but right around that time, right, 5 years ago, we've seen this massive shift in every mousetrap that could be possibly made. And I mean that in the metaphor of like software, SaaS, program, widget has been done, right, for the most part. And what you've really started to see now is a massive shift, and the secret sauce that really has served me well and made it capable for me to serve the companies well that I work with, even the companies that I coach nowadays. It's like, how do we fix the customer success track immediately, right? Like I think that we are on this new shift where, you know, traditional startup metrics and traditional startup sales approaches, and even the idea of going to your friends and family for your first raise, all of that stuff is off the table. None of that stuff's going to work the way that you want it to unless you have a significant proven track record of this stuff. But if you can establish early on, and this is my secret sauce, establish early on what's the best way for you to touch your customer right away and walk them all the way to what I call the first check and make them raving fans, the customer success feedback loop is the most important thing and the real differentiator for people. If you look at all of the unicorns, if you look at all the companies that are making money, I guarantee you the one thing they will always share in common is they've mastered the customer success role, which is now like growth, kind of marketing, kind of customer, but it's shifting. But you master that and then you just scale it. That's been the thing for me.
Fantastic. Yeah, touching the customer right away and converting them into raving fans. Fantastic. Thank you. That's secret sauce. So I think the panel objectives are almost there in Neal's opening statement there. Jesse, as a specialist in sprints and that get companies unstuck, how do you unravel the power of agile product development, sprint cycles to facilitate market creation? You know, one thing is to know that agile is the right thing to go about it, but it's not right enough if it doesn't get you the market results. So what's your take on it?
That is a great question. I think first and foremost, agile in itself is meant to be broken. It's meant to bend rules, and I think that that's what makes new market creation possible, is that you're breaking some rules, or you're really, frankly, if you look at the unicorns that we were just talking about, I totally agree. I'd probably pepper in that a big reason why they succeed is an overwhelming number of value propositions delivered to the user. There's a book out now, it's called The Innovation Stack, where you can learn a bit more about that. And then a touch of nonsense. And I mean that in the way of, it's not always direct linear logic that leads to success. It's about, you know, that overwhelming value proposition. So when it comes to market creation, there's a few things. Collaboration is king. If you can leverage the skills and abilities and connections of other firms without compromising your own venture safety or your own user's experience, I genuinely believe it's your responsibility to leverage those strategic partnerships for growth. Inclusion and human-centered design, that's another one. If you're going to use agile practices, you're embracing uncertainty. And the best way to test against those uncertainties is to make your work human-centered. Get it in front of folks, get quick feedback. And when with regard to like growth-based companies, diversity. I mean, in both the way that we typically think of it, and also in the more like smaller manifestations, in that diversity of thoughts and of experiences, those in all methods of diversity, it just breeds resilience. And that's a big part of market creation, is you need to be resilient, because oftentimes folks aren't going to know what you're talking about the first 5 or 10 times you try to say it.
No, that's fantastic. And it's, again, like it kind of breaks the, the usual myth about Agile, right? Being very process driven. And what you mentioned is exactly how Agile should be. It should be human centered. It should be flexible enough and not just rigid. So great insights. Thank you. Craig, 6 startups under your belt. You pretty much started off building your first application from your college dorm. So you kind of built it all, you've broken it all. So there is a wealth of best practices that you could share to the audience that enables products to scale from 0 to high growth. So love to hear that.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. Thanks. That's a complex question, but I think what I see, and just having experienced failure, a number of times with trying to scale my own products, is you need to be focused on the market, and you need to be ready to throw things overboard when they're not working. No matter what you thought the starting point or your end game was going to be, it's likely the path to get there is going to be wildly different than what you thought, right? And so what that might mean is your pricing is entirely off, or your ideal customer profile is wrong. As a founder, you have to be really flexible in how you think about that entire process by which you're acquiring and converting customers. If you're too rigid, then you're probably not going to make it. The other thing is that I think a lot of challenges that I see founders have around customer acquisition and moving customers through the customer journey is that they don't actually have tangible goals. And what I mean by that is you're doing a bunch of stuff top of funnel. You're advertising in different marketing channels. You're spending a bunch of time on organic and SEO and PPC, and you're doing thought leadership. How do you quantify that, right? And so there's a couple key metrics that I like to look at. One is what I call an endpoint acquisition goal, which is if you do 15 different things top of funnel, 15 different channels, what's the one metric you measure success or failure based on, right? And then what are the steps that you're taking to move users through the funnel? And what I found over and over again is that if you can actually build your own playbook for that, again, with some flexibility in mind, and you track all of those metrics and you understand what's working and what's not, and you're honest about that, including things like where you're spending time or where you're spending money. Try to build an apples comparison and double down on the stuff that's working and continuously reiterate through testing and experimentation. So those are just some ways that I've I guess figured it out over the years, mostly from the hard way.
Now, Craig, that's great, because a lot of times I believe that it's almost like entrepreneurs develop this relationship with their product and they try to hold it on. And in any relationship, that doesn't work, right? So it's,
Totally.
you know it when you let it go. So I think I totally get that feedback. On to Rachel now. Rachel, you're kind of the queen of keeping product expectations grounded, especially with a ton of low-tech clients when you deal with them. So how do you manage, Rachel, to strike the balance between budget, low-tech background clients, and product needs? Because it's a very tough balance to do so. Would love your thoughts on that.
So it's taken a couple years to kind of figure out and become, better at communicating with clients. And it's really about setting expectation with the client. With our particular platform, we have different levels that they're able to buy into for the yearly licensing fees. So one of the benefits are they kind of get it clear, this is the product, these are the features. And if they want something beyond it, either it can move them up to the next level or it's custom development. And that's where we have a larger conversation. But what I've kind of learned of going through that process is really understanding what is their pain point and what are they trying to solve with technology? Because sometimes you have these really big ideas, especially when you're dealing with low tech people. It's kind of like, why can't you build all this? Can't you do it in 24 hours? And you're like, no, there's so much complexity. There's so much to do. And it's not like it's $100 and gets it done. So some of it, it's just having that conversation, understanding it's not as easy. People are accustomed to using great products like Instagram and Facebook every day, where it makes it look easy to build out a lot of these platforms, but not really understanding the manpower it takes behind the scenes of UI, UX, development, QA testing, all these processes that you have to go through. So sometimes it's just having a really honest communication and trying to set timelines as best that you can. One thing I learned is sometimes like you push out your timelines, like even internally, if you're like, I want this by October 1, you might tell them November 1. So you kind of give yourself like an extra like 4 weeks. And the worst cases, that's the date that you deliver. And the best cases, you're able to deliver it early. So like sometimes that's better to kind of like pad on extra time for yourself with customer communication. But sometimes it's also like really learning what they're looking for to use with the technology. And you might realize you already built it out. You just have to communicate a feature and function that's already in your platform of how they might be able to adapt to it. Or it could be like a smaller tweak than what they're actually trying to say. So the bad thing is like listen to your customers, what they have to say, and then make your recommendations. And sometimes don't be afraid, like even as the founder and CEO myself, you kind of put that expectation to give an answer to the client right now. Like, give me a timeline, give me a yes or no on the feature, give me a cost right now. But sometimes I have to say like, let me take it back to the team. Give me a couple days to get back to you. I'll send you an email with all the information. And also this last point to it is don't be afraid to say no. Sometimes building out technology just because your customer wants it might not make sense for the business. And I've had that a couple times where I had to say like, that doesn't make sense for us. That doesn't kind of fit into our roadmap and it doesn't make sense within our timelines. And some clients say, okay, that's fine. You know, just was putting it out there. And then sometimes it might not be a right product fit and you kind of have to be okay with that going into that conversation.
No, fantastic insights. Honest conversations, will always help entrepreneurs connect better, regardless of the technology background of the client. So great insights. Thank you, Rachel. Now back to Neal. Neal, I always find this dilemma, in product and businesses, it's always like between the visionaries and the idealists, right? So vision meeting the reality in the startup world or in the product world is a constant battle, right? While your CEOs and the CFOs are talking about, the hockey stick curve and yada, 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 you're concerned about, hey, what am I going to do with the next sprint, So it's kind of that constant battle between being real with the product and also supporting the business vision. It's a tough, struggle. Yep. Not a lot of startups successfully manage to find a balance, to find a win-win situation out of it. And for someone who's had these incredible exits, in the last few years, how do you manage to do that? Especially being, on the product side of the ownership, making sure that the vision side of the business is not compromised or vice versa.
Yeah, really, this is a really good question. And like Craig said, we like to talk about the successes. We don't like to talk about the failures and the ones that didn't make it. As an entrepreneur, I think we all, we kind of take it with us, and it's a battle scar almost, right? Something I've learned over time is that, so I've learned from trial and error, from more than a couple of failures, and then how to go back to the drawing board, as we all do, on how do you learn from this really, really well and move forward from it. And what I learned is like there is a human psychology element that one of my mentors mentored me on a while back, that as humans, we crave consistency and discipline. And then I pull from a lot of my military training days, and the only thing how do you get people who come from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different elements, and get them to, change course rapidly, right? Like, so I just said that there's a natural innate thing that humans crave: consistency and kind of discipline. The startup world is anything but that, right? And so how do you get a bunch of people together and then get them to steer constantly and be comfortable away from that? And what I've learned over time is two things. And this is what I think my goal here is to share something that is practical, that every single person that's on this panel can implement and share in their business, and they will see immediate changes in what's going on in the business, right? These are the two most important things I've learned. The first one is understand everybody in your team's mission and purpose. So the only way that you can change and steer people away from consistency and discipline is by moving towards a like-minded mission, right? It's how the military moves people to do different things in stressful environments. So know your team's mission and purpose, right? And that could be, I want to make a lot of money. It could be, I want to be on stage a lot. But if you know that every person in the team's mission and purpose, whenever there's a disagreement, whenever those ideals are not aligned, you can, as long as you can align and be like, this is going to be the thing. Like, we're going to move the product to get this way. I don't want to do that. Well, it's going to get you to your mission quicker. All right, well then I'll follow you down that path, right? That's the number one thing that I've learned over time. The second thing is it's very, very important that you understand what everybody in the organization, what makes that person happy. And if you can combine those two things together, I understand every person on my team's mission and purpose, and I understand what makes them happy. Anytime there has to be a pivot and a change, you now understand what you need to do, right? So I've been in organizations, and I think everybody here has been in an organization where some authority leader, executive person comes in with this big, amazing spreadsheet that they worked on it for 2 weeks. It tells you how all the problems, it tells you how they're going to fix them. And he puts it down in front of everybody. And within 30, 45, 60 seconds, half the room is rolling their eyes, and suddenly you've lost everybody, right? And what I've learned over time is part of that is because two members of the team, what makes them happy is being able to go home on time and see their kids. One of the people on the team, what makes them happy is not having to be in these meetings and just be doing engineering and coding all day long. And the other person on the marketing team would rather be wowing people with some kind of amazing thing. But if that person who comes jamming into the conversation, trying to be the savior and save the problem, just even by doing it that way, you've already, broken the chain and the conversation and created part of the tussle where you really don't have time for that. So it's like, figure out everyone's mission, figure out what makes them happy, and then move as this kind of cohesive unit through things. And then if you want to save people, you don't have to even spend the time doing the Excel sheet, because you know how to move and tweak people through complicated conversations really easily.
Fantastic. I think the union of minds towards the mission and combined mission in hand, very well said. It's fantastic. So just in coming next to you, I'm going to leverage your expertise in the AR, VR space, / deep tech, because today a lot of the startup entrepreneurs, want to have some piece of the deep tech, right? Whether it's the AR, VR, AI, machine learning, NLP. And while just normal product development is crazy and can be challenging, when you add those deep tech components to your product development mix, things get even more complicated, right? So what is your advice for those startup entrepreneurs? Obviously we want to leverage the deep tech expertise, but can get into real trouble managing the product development cycle if it doesn't go well.
Another great question. First piece of advice specifically for entrepreneurs is to trust your experts. It's hard to do that, but when we're talking about growth, you really want to know that you can rely on your experts, and that you're probably going to get a better result by doing so. Probably. The second one that's very important is to, especially with like deep tech, and I'll talk about just VR and AR to start, is you have to know your audience. We say that in product all the time, but you genuinely have to know why you're building something in VR or AR in particular. We don't, and as a user and a creator of XR, I'm going to put my user hat on right now. We don't need more clickbait junk. We do not, it's not if you build it, they will come. Oh, we have to put out a VR experience because then everyone's going to come to our website. It's really, really disappointing if you go on YouTube and you look up, there are some beautiful 360 experiences and VR experiences that have 500 views, 1,000 views, that a lot of money went into. It's deeply disappointing. So you want to know why you're building it and who you're building it for. Specifically, it's okay to start small though. I'm not trying to deter anybody from deep tech, especially VR and AR. Yeah, it's Facebook and Instagram filters. You'll see those pop up a lot. check out Spark. Dip a toe in, make a filter. See what it's like to have people use it. You can put your company's logo at the bottom. You can get comfortable with the community without kind of going full dive. But if you are going to create something, deep tech, any type of platform specifically, it has to be inclusive. We have enough walled gardens in our lives already, and XR has failed before. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, inclusion, and really just know why you're building it.
Got it. Now, I think it's sometimes, it doesn't, the herd mentality when it comes to deep tech is so strong that sometimes it undermines the power of deep tech itself. So make sure that it's relevant, make sure that it's inclusive. Absolutely agree with you. Craig, next to you, I know that you're a big believer in why you should not build as much stuff as you think you should, right? Love to hear more about it, because a lot of times I have trouble talking to my portfolio companies and telling them the difference between, hey, is it a must-have or is it a nice-to-have, right? And sometimes a lot of time and effort goes into, to spending on what probably are nice to have and not a must-have. So love to hear your thoughts on, on that philosophy that you are very closely attached to.
Sure. Yeah, I love this topic. Yeah. So pardon me if this sounds obnoxious, right? But I've looked at startups for years, and I've looked at the data on startup failure. And there's great publications by CB Insights. Paul Graham tweets about this stuff. There's many articles written about startup postmortems. And guess what? Almost none of those failures have anything to do with the product, right? They have everything to do with the market sizing, customer personas, acquisition, pricing, business model, retention. And so I think the other component is we're great at building stuff. We're founders, we're product people, we're designers, we're engineers, we're creative. This is why we start companies. We're good at that stuff, right? And I think there's a part of that feels really good. We want to put stuff out there. And frankly, we want to be busy. We're hiring teams of people. If people aren't busy, then we question the value, right? All of those things contribute to building a bunch of stuff. And where I tend to get kind of passionate about this topic is around looking at the actual usage, right? A great example is, I try to use smaller companies a lot because I think we can connect with smaller companies than the big companies like Netflix, but I'll use a Netflix example. During the coronavirus, Netflix had a huge opportunity to build a watch party feature, right? There's multiple different startups that got funding for that feature. Hulu built it. Amazon has a version of it. Yet Netflix didn't do it. Why? Right? They couldn't clearly articulate the core product value in terms of retention that was going to come from that feature. So they didn't do it. And I think that's the lens we need to look through, right? Is what is the stuff that we're building's real value to whom? And if you can't answer that with a clearly articulated value to the majority, most, if not all of your audience, then you probably should spend a lot more time on acquiring more customers to figure out what those things are that you're actually missing. So I'll pause there, but that's, I think we want to be busy, but we really have to look at the utilization of what we're putting out there and be constrained.
No, that's a fantastic response. So I think at the end of the day, it's all about who do you create the value for, and also how do you go and measure it, right? Because sometimes we make a lot of mistakes in measuring. The metrics are wrong. Because we're probably measuring the wrong things as either an element of success. Sometimes we're actually undermining some of the metrics, which might lead to building certain things on the product there. So totally with you on that, my friend. Rachel, to you, I know that there are a lot of entrepreneurs here who are building products for, again, people, across to the whole technology diaspora. So is there a specific process that you have followed, that you have worked, when you meet prospects and clients, understanding the requirements and then translating it to the product team so they can go and build, a strong product, whether, just also, efficient product planning, sprint cycle planning. Is there a process that you have seen success, that you would like to share?
So typically at upace, we sell into like 4 different industries. So we have some assumptions of what some of their pain points, problems that they might be facing. So when we get an inquiry or we have an upcoming meeting, typically we do like some due diligence to look at their website and kind of make some assumptions of what we think their problems are going to come with when we have our first introductory call. So typically we'll have a 15-minute first call. We'll ask them questions, ask them maybe how they heard about us, what's going on, what they're looking to maybe change or adapt, and just hear from them in their own words of what they need with technology and what they're planning on doing with it. Once we know that, typically we schedule a demonstration that's an hour long where we go through our whole technology and our platform and show through like different levels of options. From that, we're able to dive deeper into, on our last call, you talked about this problem, here's a potential solution. And typically we know from that, is this the solution that works right from them? We ask them a lot of questions throughout. What I've learned is really taking the backseat of listening is kind of the best one to really understand versus like talking at the prospect. Then I just share so much about who we are. I don't really learn about who they are. So the more we listen and we learn that, the more they tell us, the better I'm able to find ways to make the technology work, or if not, figure out a plan of what we might have to build to be able to get there. Sometimes as well, it's setting expectations. So the client might want, to go all the way to the moon, but maybe going to a particular place is where they could go. So I think sometimes it's setting that and also helping them figure out, especially we work with a lot of people who are low tech. So going from 0 to 100 might not make the most sense. Let's go 0 to 50 and then 3 months later to 75, then another 6 months, go all the way to 100. So sometimes it's us creating that roadmap for them to also set expectations to be successful with the product and kind of laying out what does that look like and what does that mean. And we have that, a lot of clients really like that when they're prospects, that we don't overwhelm them at once saying you have to use all this technology on day one. So it's creating out a plan, but really my biggest suggestion is like listen the most that you can, learn from that, and then you look for consistencies. Like we found consistency in one of our industries is Jewish community centers. So we see consistency in patterns. It's problem throughout all of them. So then when we are in touch doing marketing or going on to our next one, they feel better if we understand the problem. We're able to say, oh, we helped this center fix this problem. And that might be a problem they're having as well. So hearing that another one that we help solve them also really helps make the case. And I'm thinking this could be the solution that could solve it for me as well.
No, I mean, absolutely love the chronology in which you explained it. So active listening and find out more about who they are rather than just kind of being sometimes obsessed with the product that you have for them, which might or might not be the direct fit, and also being iterative, as you said, instead of going from 0 to 100, take it down in steps so that they can consume, appreciate, or provide feedback so that you're not going to completely, have gone to, 4 different steps, while the first step was a misstep. So fantastic points, Rachel. Thank you. Back to Neal here. Neal, again, having been part of these startups have scaled and extended to great success stories, there's sometimes a myth that when startups get to say Series A, B, and beyond, the products now are more stable and do not need to be disrupted. So, love your thoughts about is how true is it, if it is, or do you believe that a product or disruption pivots or just a continuous evolution of the product lifecycle, so that if someone in the audience feels that, oh, after Series A and B, I do not have product O's, I just want to have them rethink about it.
Sorry about that. I was still muted for a second. The thing that comes up for me there is I remember in the first couple of times I tried to even just do a pitch deck to people, how hard I thought it was, or how I didn't think there was a lot of money out there. And the crazy thing is that what people should realize and be aware of is like investment cash is if you have a great idea, you've done a great thing and you built something, investment cash is actually very, very cheap. Like it is readily available as long as you can get in front of the right people, right? And what one of my mentors had taught me a long time ago that has served me very well is there's only 3 reasons why somebody wants to invest in your company, right? The first one is there's a proven team of people that have done it before. They've got a proven track history of it. The second one is there's some kind of intellectual property or data or something that has something that's special about what you're doing. And the third one is the opportunity for us to make a lot of money. And the secret sauce I've learned over time is that if you have 2 out of those 3 and you're going for investment, you're probably going to, the likelihood of you getting invested in is going to be more likely. But once you get that money, you better go get the third one, right? Because it's like, we seem to think that, and this happens, I think, with companies all the way up into the public sector, is like once you reach a certain Series A, B, micro cap, public, even if you're a small, medium business who's just making cash, you know, the problems as you get bigger in size and bigger in revenue and bigger in aspirations, that the problems become bigger and the solutions become bigger as well. So you climb, the mountain never seems to come to a peak, right? It just gives you a view to the next one, and you've got to decide whether or not you're going to hold steady at that part in your journey. And many, you know, companies can do that. Or if you're going to go, you know, and decide you want to grow more, and then decide whether you're going to invest that capital largely in growth and not see the retention and not see the revenue growth that you want to, but invest back in the business and go up to the next mountain for the next view, or not. Because I mean, at AppGuard, my former company, we raised 100 million in 2 years over 4 rounds. And every single time you have that one little celebration, it lasts a couple of weeks, and you get an upgrade in your swag, and you buy something nice for your family who puts up with you during that space. And then you got to go right back to it. So, you know, I think that's why I think the couple things I said earlier around what makes the person happy in your team and why you're doing what you're doing, is really, really important to be on the same page, because that's when, you know, internal fires really start.
No, that's great. You know, I think I heard someone say that to me a long time ago, that just Christmas is one day in the year. So you work the rest of the 364 days to have a really good Christmas, and you've done well. So yeah, it totally is, you know, like for startup entrepreneurs, as you scale, you're only getting better in dealing with bigger and better problems, you know, and, you know, you obviously get better returns, but it's still, you know, building products is a never-ending cycle. So great insights,
Right.
Neal. Thank
you. Right. Hey, I just want to say one thing that just came up for me as well is when I first heard Tony Hsieh talk about Zappos, right? And they, you know, what they had figured out was where was the most risk in the organization, right, of their success. And for anyone who's not heard the story, you know, for Zappos, who would send people shoes, they had said the worst thing that could happen is that we send the wrong size shoe to somebody and they post online that we screwed up their shoe size, and it could be considered offensive if we send a kid shoe or a woman's shoe to the wrong person. And they made that their part of their mission statement, and they put all their money and all their effort into that. When somebody ordered the wrong pair of shoes, even if the customer was wrong, they would send the customer 2 or 3 pairs of shoes to fix it. And so they would take an opportunity where they could really mess something up and flip it and turn that person into a raving fan. And because of that, they were able to never have a negative complaint in their organization. And that's a good example of, like, you find that weak point in your armor and make it a way for you to cast yourself forward. And that's really the way you got to think about it.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Thank you. Just as we get to the final 15 minutes here, just want to make sure that the audience do get their opportunity as well. So if there are any questions for the panelists, do let us know via the chat button. Happy to take them to the panelists so that your questions can get answered as well. Moving on to Jesse. Jesse, what do you think, according to you, are some of the most repeated product mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making time after again?
So mistakes entrepreneurs make is a little bit different than like product mistakes that a client may make, right? So with regard to entrepreneurs in particular, I'd say getting stuck, or any entrepreneurial venture, to make it a bit broader, getting stuck in exploit mode. And what I mean by that is that when we're young and scrappy startups, when you're just trying to get your first follower, your first 10 users, we're constantly exploring. And once you find that product market fit, that like ephemeral thing that everyone's looking for, and you find it, you exploit it until you're profitable. But you may continue to exploit and exploit and exploit. Next thing you know, some competitor comes up with some new feature, and now you're 6 or 9 or even 12 months behind in the development life cycle. Not promoting feature parity here, but you should continue to explore. Always be exploring. Always keep that scrappy mindset as long as you can. And I think that kind of comes from pairing back with some of the things that we've talked about, which is, how do you measure success? Are you reaching high enough? If you're hitting 100% of your goals, the classic OKR line. If you're hitting 100% of your goals 100% of the time, you're probably not reaching high enough. And if you're still trying to predict every single thing, project management style, when things are going to roll out, you're probably being too specific and too narrow. You should probably switch to OKRs. It'll change your life. The last thing I'd say entrepreneurs do is, and I've been guilty of this before, it's how I learned my life lessons with my early failures, is assuming that cool is sufficient, and getting feedback around that thing that you think is so cool. If it hurts, it's because you let it hurt. In fact, I'd say if customer feedback hurts your feelings, the more it hurts, the more at risk you and your company are. You should be user-centered as often as possible, and welcome feedback as much as possible. It's going to help.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Craig, like I always feel that at times product specialists are many a times underrated, underutilized. What can we do to change this? Do you think, is it because of a lack of more formal education that's preventing from the product role, or the product owner, or roles like chief product officer, like the one that you have, taking more center stage? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's definitely an emerging field. It's funny because like when I've run a couple agencies, and back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s even, clients didn't want to actually pay for like the strategy, the actual work that a pure product manager nowadays would be doing, right? Like you really had to sell that, because there wasn't really space in the market for it. They were used to getting an engineer and some stuff done, and the whole thought process around it, they didn't want it, they couldn't quantify it. And fast forward now, and there's this whole profession, right? It's emerging. It's actually one of the fastest growing, well-paying areas of the startup market side. I think a lot of it is awareness, right? I think colleges took a long time to catch up to having product management as a track. I think that the days of building like really, really simple products are kind of over. There are so many different devices that you need to support. And so I think the timing is good from a standpoint of connecting and bridging the gaps between, say, engineering and like leadership stakeholders and then clients and what they need. The role of the product manager has transcended even that of like a project manager, where it's not just building tasks, it's also building tasks and applying them to a vision and being able to clearly articulate that vision. So I think it has been underutilized. I do think it's emerging and growing. I've seen a ton of stuff out there. I mean, Product School is a good community. I do a bunch of stuff with them. There's other areas where training programs for product managers and stuff, but mostly it's just like about getting out there and getting into it. So I do see it as an emerging field.
Oh, I had trouble unmuting myself. No, thank you, Craig. Rachel, you've been on the side of selling products also against building products, right? So you've been on both sides. What excites you the most, and what's more challenging?
So I think it depends on the day for some of that. What excites me most within the business is after the sale and you're seeing your client implement the product and you're hearing about their success, how you saved them time, you made them look better in the job, whatever that goal is for them, and you're able to see like your product achieving it for that. So it's a combination of what we've built being impactful for the client that we're working with. And that's really what makes it worth it to us at the end of the day, is that our platform is doing what it's built to do. But I also love working with our clients and our future clients on what features do they need next to grow. During COVID was, what technology do we need to help build to make their business survive? How do they switch to offering virtual memberships to have a form of income coming in when their facilities were closed? So that part is also really exciting, is figuring out what can we build to help them reach their goals to be successful. And I always say to our clients, like, you become like our partner in the process. So I want to make sure we're building efficiently based upon what their needs are throughout the process. So it's really a combination for me. There's challenges on both ends. I don't view myself like as a salesperson. Like, I not the typical like salesy. I always say like I'm not the best at sales, but I'm good at building relationships and building partnerships with people. So that's really where, we've excelled at. So I would say the more challenging is like in those like very sales moments for me. So that's where I like the building, creating the UI UX, but it depends on the day. Like you have ups and downs. You're putting out fires maybe with the development team of building, or you're putting out fires like the sales team expectations. So I think it's a combination, but I love when we're able to see the success of our product.
Great, thank you, Rachel. I thought I put you on the spot there, but appreciate the candor. I'm just kind of fielding a few questions from the audience right now here. One of the questions that we received earlier was, Neal, this was to your point, was converting customers to raving fans. Easy said, but very difficult to execute. So are there any starting tips? The first movers, where do they start? So would love to hear a few more tips on that end.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and maybe I'm pulling from my experience here, it's not as complicated as we made it out to be, right? I think a lot of times, in the startup community and technology, and because we're trying to measure and manage it so well, I think it's a transaction, right, that takes place, and I can boil it down to two ways. There's only two reasons why people buy things, right? It's either we either need it or we want it, and it's either very transactional and it becomes commoditized, right? Like, I need to buy a light bulb, right? I need a light bulb because it went out, and there's no emotion tied to it. So the customer success track along that, there's only a couple places that it can be great or it can go wrong. And then there's the flip side of that, where I buy something like a pair of sneakers or a shirt and it makes me feel a certain way. And there's only a couple of milestones along that customer journey that makes me feel a certain way. So I think if you can take those out and understand those, and then hit them along the way, and then build a process there to support those things. What you're seeing over time now is that the world is so complicated and there's so many choices to buy things, is what you're seeing is successful companies that are showing really good revenues. It's from customer retention more so than the cost of acquisition of a new customer. So it's better to focus there.
Got it. Now, thank you. I think we might have time for another couple of questions, but this one I would love Craig and Jesse's inputs on it. Post-COVID, have you guys seen changes in the way your sprint cycles are getting defined? You know, like typically, you know, like different products and different industries have, okay, 2 weeks is a good time, 3 weeks is a good time. For some of them, you know, like, you know, the more mature products are 4-week sprint cycles. Now is it coming up to every week? Let's have a sprint. So what are you guys seeing some of the trends when it comes to the sprint cycles itself as part of the product development effort?
I'll take a quick pass at that. So Sandboxx is in the military tech space. And when COVID hit, a bunch of the military bases shut down, which means that, you know, we get put into a world of hurt because our main product is actually shipping letters to recruits at boot camp. If you can't get letters to boot camp because there's nobody there or they've paused, then that's challenging. We actually, you know, we took a focused approach on building out what we call ancillary product lines. So we took signals from customers that showed us that they might be willing to buy kind of different things that add value to their recruit, but maybe not in the core format that we've been selling. So like not our main product. And we quickly iterated and basically pivoted to building some of that stuff. Now, again, it was measured. We had experiment data already that showed like if we build these things, then people will actually purchase them and there's value created on both sides. But we absolutely shifted our model. We didn't necessarily change the process all that much. We did go from 2-week sprints that were very planned out and kind of really like fairly rigid, which helped efficiency, to 1 week to Kanban style, where now like really, really rapid. And now we're kind of course correcting back to that 1 week sprint, and we'll likely end up back on 2-week sprints. So we've been flexible in how we've approached that to adapt to the real-time changes that we've seen.
Greg, thank you. Just I think we got a minute before I have to hand it over to Rachel for the closing remarks, but you know, a rapid fire response to that question there.
I think that was really well said, Craig, and thank you for sharing that. We, at least inside of Medicaid, one of our projects just took about 5 or 6 teams, and now they're all coming together. So I was on this like Black Ops like discovery team, and we were Kanban, and it was great. I'm very laissez-faire. Now that we're coming together, and now that things are starting to settle again, we actually recently converted to back to a standard sprint cycle of 2 weeks. So sounds like there's some overlap of experience there. But to Neal's point, I think that we grew to crave structure because so much is unstructured now. We're all working from home. But even though we were checking those boxes, we wanted to at least have something that we can predict. And I think that's what brought us back to the traditional structure. So great question.
Awesome. Rachel, back to you. But first of all, thank you guys. And it's been a privilege to moderate this panel. Jesse, Craig, Rachel, and Neal, thank you so much. And thanks to the audience. Rachel, over to you for the closing remarks.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much, Mohsin, Neal, Craig, Jesse, for participating in this panel today. I learned a lot from you guys. I hope the attendees also learned from everyone here. So a big thank you for everyone who attended. Again, we're almost over for our second day of DC Startup Week. We still have 3 full days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. Couple sessions going on today that are kicking off, be seen in the media, pivoting, and then we're ending today at 6 p.m. with our own failure stories. So talking about failures, how you overcome them, just a really fun, happy, and networking event to meet a lot of the community. So I hope to see you guys either on the 5 p.m. talk starting right now or at 6 p.m. So thank you again for being here today. And anyone has any questions, feel free to put it on the activity stream or reach out to any of the panelists here, either in Attendify through their speaker profiles or directly on LinkedIn. So thank you guys so much.